Good afternoon.
Good
Good afternoon,
afternoon.
distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ganbold Basanjao, the head of the ESCAP East and Northeast Asia office. Thank you for joining us for the policy dialogue on inclusive subregional cooperation in East and Northeast Asia for sustainable development, co-organized by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea and Incheon Metropolitan City, in celebration of the United Nations 75th anniversary and the 10th anniversary of ESCAP's East and Northeast Asia office. 10 years ago, ESCAP's ENA office was established for the purpose of promoting subregional cooperation and integration in East and Northeast Asia. With the full support and cooperation from our member states, associate members, civil society organizations, NGOs, think tanks, and various public and private sector partners, we have been able to achieve progress in many areas. However, in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic, it is now more important than ever for countries in this subregion to come together and address our common challenges. Today, I'm very honored to have so many eminent speakers join the policy dialogue to share their insights on key agenda that requires strengthened regional cooperation for East and Northeast Asia to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. As we have a very packed schedule, without further ado, let me give the floor to the Executive Secretary of ESCAP, Ibu Armida Salsea Alice Jabana, to deliver her opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Gumball. A very good afternoon to all of you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Policy Dialogue on Inclusive Subregional Cooperation in East and Northeast Asia for Sustainable Development, organized in celebration of UN 75th anniversary, as well as the 10th anniversary of ESCAP East and Northeast Asia Office. It gives me great pleasure to express my heartfelt gratitude to the government of the Republic of Korea and Incheon Metropolitan City for their unwavering support to ESCAP, especially to the East and Northeast Asia Office. It has significantly advanced inclusive multilateralism in the subregion while connecting member states to promote regional and global sustainable development agenda. The celebration of the UN 75th anniversary is taking place at a time of an unprecedented socio-economic crisis due to COVID-19 pandemic, which is also stalling the progress towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. In 1945, the United Nations was created to prevent the immense suffering caused by the Second World War. The COVID-19 pandemic has provided another opportunity for us to build back better in this sustainable recovery that can help our work together to overcome these unfolding global challenges. Inclusive multilateralism based on mutual trust, cooperation, and inclusivity are as relevant today as they were 75 years ago. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the United Nations Secretary General at the General Assembly ceremony for the 75th anniversary pointed out that, and I quote, we have a surplus of multilateral challenges and a deficit of multilateral solutions, end quote. Secretary General work multilateralism and inclusive multilateralism that bring together all stakeholders and not limited to government. This message has a clear resonance to the Northeast Asia subregion. There are several common development challenges in this subregion in areas such as socio-economic disparities, aging population, connectivity, and climate change, including air and marine pollution, among others. Time to act is now. Member states must put together their collective might to overcome these new and emerging challenges. Inclusive multilateralism is the key driver to harness the spirit of solidarity. Governments should work with stakeholders to promote innovation, support technical expertise, and raise financial contribution for advancing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I'm very pleased to recognize important steps in advancing multilateralism in Northeast Asia. Governments are already proposing solution-oriented policies through practical programs and seek synergies, which is possible only through extensive dialogue, exchanges, and above all, on steering multilateral cooperation. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at the regional level, ESCAP is uniquely positioned to play a much-needed role as a neutral facilitator or broker, while remain engaged in offering solutions to deliver on the SDGs. Over the past 7 decades, ESCAP has been directly contributing to enhancing multilateral cooperation among member states through regional and sub-regional platforms. For example, with the government of the Republic of Korea and Incheon metropolitan city's generous contribution, ESCAP has been able to provide a unique sub-regional platform to foster multilateral cooperation among all sub-regional members: China, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Japan, Mongolia, Republic of Korea, and the Russian Federation, and associate members Hong Kong, China, and Macau, China. In another landmark initiative in 1993, member states established the Northeast Asian Subregional Program for Environmental Cooperation, or better known as NESPEC, to tackle cross-boundary environmental challenges. Serving as its secretariat, the East and Northeast Asia Office has been actively engaged with member states in building new platforms on air pollution, marine environment, climate change, just to name a few. Furthermore, the office has also been instrumental in launching and supporting result-based partnership, network, and agreements aimed at developing collective actions in areas of trade, transport, energy, and innovation. The Northeast Asia Power Interconnection and Cooperation Forum, or NEARPIC, Northeast Asia Development Cooperation Forum, and the Intergovernmental Agreement on International Road Transport along the Asian Highway Network are just to name some of the key initiatives. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as we celebrate the 10th anniversary of the East and Northeast Asia Office, it is timely to reflect and look ahead on ways to serve member states in their efforts to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Together, we must ensure Build Back Better in the face of the great uncertainties of COVID-19 pandemic. There is enormous potential to bolster regional cooperation for the implementation of the SDGs. We are organizing this policy dialogue to explore opportunities for harnessing sub-regional cooperation, which is founded upon the principles of the UN values and norms. We need a greater, deeper, stronger, and comprehensive regional and sub-regional cooperation. Today, I very much look forward to seeking the views, policy guidance of the eminent speakers so that we remain committed to accelerate achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals in the sub-region and beyond. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ibu Armida, for your opening remarks and for your insights on the way forward to strengthen the partnership we've been able to build in this sub-region. Now we will have a congratulatory video message from Mr. Lee Dae-ho, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea, and Mr. Park Nam-chun, Mayor of Incheon Metropolitan City.
I would like to offer my heartfelt congratulations on the 75th anniversary of the United Nations and the 10th anniversary of the ESCAP East and Northeast Asia Office. I extend my sincere appreciation to Your Excellency Gangbolt Basangjav, head of the UN ESCAP East and Northeast Asia Office, for organizing this meaningful event. The ESCAP, as the regional hub of the United Nations, has played a pivotal role in leading the efforts to achieve inclusive and sustainable development in the Asia and Pacific region. Since joining the ESCAP in 1954, Korea has evolved into the largest donor country in this important organ, enjoying an excellent partnership with it. Against this backdrop, Korea hosted the ESCAP's East and Northeast Asia Office which was established in 2010 to promote inclusive and sustainable development and to render support to countries in the region in traveling the path towards the realization of development goals. Over the last 10 years, the ENEA office has truly been providing a valuable platform for dialogue and cooperation among member countries. And it has been playing a great role in coordinating a range of activities aimed at strengthening subregional cooperation and delivering the mandates of the UN ESCAP in the region. In particular, the ENEA office has been playing a key part in environmental cooperation in Northeast Asia, serving as a secretariat for the Northeast Asian Subregional Program for Environmental Cooperation, NEASPEC, which is the only comprehensive framework for intergovernmental cooperation for addressing environmental challenges in Northeast Asia. It has also served as a secretariat for Northeast Asia Clean Air Partnership, ESCAP, to address transboundary air pollution issues. In the age of interconnectedness, the coordinating role carried out by the ENEA office holds all the greater importance. Indeed, the pending issues of improving environmental sustainability, promoting disaster resilient societies, and addressing social challenges through science, technology, and innovation cannot be dealt with by the individual efforts of a single nation alone. For sure, the ENEA office will have a greater role to play in the coming decade in fulfilling the vision of the UN ESCAP in Northeast Asia. In this regard, I would like to reiterate that the member countries' support for partnerships, knowledge, and expertise will be vital to accomplishing the ENEA office's task of fostering inclusive cooperation and integration in Northeast Asia. Korea will work steadfastly together with the other member states to render continued support to the ENEA office. The COVID-19 pandemic and ensuing challenges, unprecedented in scale, represent a serious setback for the Sustainable Development Goals. Korea will continue to share resources and indeed the insights and lessons learned from its experience of development with its partners. Korea is keen to do its part in ensuring with its partnership with the ENEA office that the partner countries in the region stay well on track and indeed build back better on the path of achieving the shared goals we all embrace. Lastly, I would like to bring my remarks to a close by expressing my genuine appreciation to the ENEA office located in Songdo International Business District with other international organizations for the key role it has played in awakening interest among young Koreans in global affairs. My sincere gratitude also goes to Incheon Metropolitan City for its continued support for the ENEA office over the last 10 years. I wish the ENEA office every continued success in the next 10 years to come. Thank you.
Hi, I am Nam Chun Park, Mayor of Incheon Metropolitan City. Congratulations on the 10th anniversary of the UN ESCAP ENEA inaugurated on 17th May 2010 in Songdo, Incheon. I want to meet and congratulate Dr. Basanjab Gangbol and all the staff in person, but because of COVID-19, I sent this congratulatory video message instead on behalf of 3 million Incheon citizens. I am fully aware and appreciative of UN ESCAP ENEA's 10-year effort for economic cooperation in the Asia-Pacific region and the fight against climate change. In pursuit of becoming an economic center in Northeast Asia and an eco-friendly city, Incheon has carried out the Green New Deal program, renewable energy projects, and the tree planting project for anti-desertification. And we are also going to promote economic cooperation with the major cities in the region by joining the Greater Two-Man Initiative. I hope for another great journey together with the ESCAP beyond the past 10 years toward a better future. I wish you good health and the development of the ESCAP as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And although Vice Minister Lee Dae-ho and Mayor Park are not able to participate in person, as Ibo Armida noted, our office is very grateful to both Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea and Incheon City for sharing ESCAP's vision and contributing to making ESCAP ENA office the hub for Northeast Asia cooperation. On this note, I would like to present to you a short video highlighting some of our partnerships and achievements.
ESCAP's East and Northeast Asia office serves as a regional development hub for subregional cooperation to achieve sustainable development for all in East and Northeast Asia. The ESCAP ENEA office supports member states in promoting regional economic integration, pursuing internationally agreed goals towards sustainable development and shared prosperity.
Our office has brought together all countries in the subregion to address common challenges of sustainable development. We built and strengthened intergovernmental platforms on environment, energy, transport, and trade. We helped NGOs, academia, and other stakeholders to become a key part of the subregional cooperation. It is partnership that enabled us to make this achievement. It is multilateral and multi-stakeholder partnership that will bring a shared prosperity for all. We are here ready to continue supporting this partnership.
The ESCAP ENEA office was established by the UN General Assembly in response to the Secretary General's pledge to support the UN's development pillar. Inaugurated on 17th May 2010 in Incheon, Republic of Korea, ESCAP ENEA also serves as the Secretariat of the Northeast Asian Subregional Program for Environmental Cooperation, or NIESPAC. The ESCAP ENEA office works with governments as well as other stakeholders of 6 member states in the subregion, namely China, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Japan, Mongolia, Republic of Korea, and the Russian Federation, and 2 associate members of Hong Kong and Macau. Northeast Asia is an economic powerhouse, building on its economic strengths to respond to the various challenges of our times, such as economic integration, social challenges, and transboundary environmental problems. Under the overall mandate to support regional economic cooperation and integration towards achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the office carries out work across sectors.
NIESPAC, which is Northeast Asia Subregional Program for Environmental Cooperation, couldn't be developed without the assistance of this office. As a result of its assistance, we could launch ESCAP, which is Northeast Asia Clean Air Partnership for elevating the air pollution and improving the air quality under the umbrella of NIESPAC.
As the Secretariat of NIESPAC, ESCAP ENEA is entrusted by the member governments and stakeholders to steer sub-regional environmental cooperation to improve environmental sustainability and address issues of common concern. Notably, the office has supported the institutionalization of programs on air pollution, marine protection, and low-carbon cities. Broad-based partnerships and inclusive dialogues with stakeholders are the key steps towards the implementation of SDGs. Through activities such as Multi-Stakeholder Forum on SDGs, the ESCAP ENA office brings together people from all 6 member states. The office also promotes science, technology, and innovation for achieving the SDGs.
Through the years, the partnership between GTI and ESCAP has gone from strength to strength. GTI looks forward to further intensifying our partnership with ESCAP. We are as ever interested in enhancing cross-sectoral cooperation towards our shared inspirations.
More than ever, seamless connectivity plays an influential role in shaping and further deepening regional integration in Asia and the Pacific. Recognizing the role of connectivity as an enabler in achieving the SDGs, ESCAP ENEA promotes shared prosperity among all member states by strengthening intra-regional connectivity on trade, transport, and energy.
ESCAP has regional cooperative mechanism. Under this umbrella, we started work on the drop monitoring. You can see this result of drop-off system example by one province and all statistical data calculated.
In order to reduce and monitor disaster risks in Northeast Asia, ESCAP ENEA is promoting disaster resilient societies by promoting cooperation and information exchange among member states, with a focus on building government capacities. To realize the long-term vision and make positive changes, the ESCAP ENEA office will promote participation and cooperation among member states and connect developing and developed countries in the sub-region.
I am fully aware and appreciative of ESCAP ENEA's 10-year effort for economic cooperation in the Asia-Pacific region and the fight against climate change.
With just 10 years left until the 2030 target date, your role to this end is now more important than ever. I'm of the view that the ENA office has an essential role to play in supporting member states towards wider and deeper cooperation in the days, months, and years ahead.
Thank you. Now I have the honor to present a special video message from the 8th Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon. I would like to take this opportunity to mention that the ESCAP East and Northeast Asia Office was established as a response to Mr. Ban's pledge as Secretary General to strengthen the United Nations development pillar.
ENA officials, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor and privilege to deliver this special video message on the occasion of the 10th anniversary of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia, ESCAP, and the Pacific East and Northeast Asia Office. I take this opportunity to highly congratulate you on this significant achievement, which comes at a critical time, not only for the Northeast Asian region, but also for our ongoing global sustainable development efforts. I'm also extremely proud to have facilitated the creation of your vital office during my tenure as UN Secretary General. In response to my pledge to strengthen the development pillar of the UN, ESCAP established its East and Northeast Asia office in 2010 to better respond to the diverse challenges of its member states and enhance key linkages between sub-regional, regional, and global actions. During my tenure as UN Secretary General, the ESCAP ENA office provided a robust platform for dialogue and cooperation among the 6 East and Northeast Asia member countries, namely China, DPRK, Japan, Mongolia, Republic of Korea, and the Russian Federation. As a result, there has been timely growth in sub-regional cooperation mechanisms on key issues at an important time for enhanced multilateral cooperation. These include, but are not limited to, energy cooperation, environmental cooperation, including the Northeast Asia Clean Air Partnership, transport connectivity along the Asian Highway, and more. In this regard, I highly commend the timely launch of the Northeast Asia Multi-Stakeholder Forum on SDGs, which is attended by governments and multi-stakeholder groups from all countries, including the DPRK. Distinguished ENA officials, ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic has changed our life as we know it. The deep socio-economic challenges that we are witnessing now, as well as the inevitable long-term impact that will be felt in the post-COVID-19 world, are likely to alter the development landscape over the next decade. With this in mind, the East and Northeast Asian subregion, as a significant global player in all aspects, must elevate its efforts to come together and make sure that sustainable development is realized. And with just 10 years left until the 2030 target date, your role to this end is now more important than ever. I continue to believe that achieving the SDGs can help bring us together in this era of expanding uncertainty and pandemic, and simultaneously pave the path to greater equality by serving as a blueprint for our recovery to build back better. Indeed, the SDGs vision for our shared future is to ensure that no one is left behind. Bringing the entire world together in 2015 to agree to the SDGs was one of my proudest achievements as UN Secretary General. But in order to meet this noble aspiration for a better future for all people and our planet, cooperation, innovation, and engagement by all stakeholders in all regions, including here in Asia, is absolutely essential. Sub-regional cooperation in East and Northeast Asia has always been somewhat difficult for a variety of reasons. However, member states also know that cooperation is the only way to solve some of the most pressing and shared challenges of our time. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and worsening climate change are just two issues that exemplify this fact. As such, I'm of the view that the ENA office has an essential role to play in supporting member states towards wider and deeper cooperation in the days building back better and forging more inclusive and prosperous world for all. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. This year marks the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. At the beginning of 2020, the United Nations launched a global dialogue initiative to hear from as many people as possible on what their greatest hopes and fears were for the future. I wanted to share the following video that came out of this global conversation.
Our world is facing unprecedented challenges. Climate change is altering natural balance. And our precious wildlife is struggling to survive. We are battling a new era of conflict and violence. There's the disruptive impact from digital technologies and shifting demographics with gaping inequalities. Now, a global epidemic is reshaping our world as we know it. We are at a crossroad at a time when our world seems so divided. Our world is struggling to breathe. For the United Nations 75th anniversary, we set out to ask the world, what are your hopes for your future?
If you could choose one thing to say to the UN, to world leaders about the future, what would that be?
In January 2020, the United Nations launched a global initiative to have the world's largest conversation on the future we want. Discussions have taken place in all settings, from classrooms to boardrooms, parliaments to village halls across the world, in order to reach as many people as possible. The United Nations listened, and the world spoke.
Justice, equality, and freedom for all.
People can really be in peace and with dignity, because our dignity was taken away from us because of our religion and because of who we are. And I hope that we are the last community who are suffering of those problems.
Health is often looked at as an expense. It is not. It is an investment.
We change by exchanging without losing ourselves.
We have run out of excuses and we are running out of time.
If we don't stop the destruction of our natural world, nothing else will matter.
More than ever before, we need solidarity, hope, and the political will to see this crisis through together.
From what we have heard, the world is not as divided as we thought. The global economy, healthcare, sanitation, education, and the hardest places hit are our top priorities from recovering from the pandemic. In response to COVID-19, greater international solidarity is urgently needed. The threat of climate change and destruction of our natural environment is the biggest fear for the future. We need increased efforts to reduce conflict and violence, and we aspire to further protect human rights. For optimism about our future, we need to look to our young people. The overwhelming majority of us believe global cooperation is more vital than ever.
Every time we fail to find solutions to global challenges, the most vulnerable people in our societies are hit the hardest.
Throughout history, we have accomplished unimaginable things, propelling each generation further than the last. There is no limit to the amount of good we can achieve together to make this world, our world, a better place. The challenges before us are universal, and we know that these challenges demand global solutions. We have the blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. The Sustainable Development Goals. In 2045, the United Nations 100th year, Let's see the change we have implemented today that will shine a light on our children's tomorrow.
Change is coming. The real power belongs to the people.
And I want to turn the question inside out as well. I will not ask, how dare you? Instead, I will ask, do you dare to?
This is the most urgent of times and the most urgent of messages. Now must be our moment for action.
This concludes our opening session of the policy dialogue. Before we move on to the first panel discussion, I will ask Ms. Yejin Ha, Program Officer of ESCAP East in Northeast Asia Office, to give a brief presentation on the key messages from the report on inclusive subregional cooperation in East and Northeast Asia for sustainable development. The full report is available for download on our website.
Thank you, Gambold, and good afternoon. Let me just share my screen first. As Gambold mentioned, our office prepared a report on inclusive subregional cooperation in East and Northeast Asia for sustainable development, to map out where the subregion is in terms of achieving the SDGs and identifying areas where subregional cooperation could accelerate progress. First, looking at a snapshot of SDGs progress in East and Northeast Asia, we can see that the subregion is lagging on most goals. There are, of course, data issues as well, where certain targets cannot be measured due to lack of reliable data. However, overall, there are significant deficits across the board. Keeping in mind that the snapshot collected data prior to COVID-19, there are likely to be further setbacks in certain areas. Among the goals that require accelerated action, we looked at SDGs that are cross-border in nature and tried to see how subregional cooperation could help achieve these goals. So one of the SDGs that would greatly benefit from strengthened subregional cooperation is Goal 13, climate action. To make meaningful progress towards achieving Goal 13, the subregion needs to deliver significant reductions in CO2 emissions through reducing reliance on fossil fuels. The East and Northeast Asia subregion has long recognized the potential for harnessing the region's abundant renewable energy sources by creating a power grid connecting all 6 countries. Some progress has been made on this front through joint feasibility studies, but greater stakeholder engagement and political will is required to actualize the potential for regional energy market integration. Seamless trade and transport connectivity is also a key component of economic recovery and development, particularly for Mongolia, which is ENEA's only landlocked country. Within East and Northeast Asia, there are wide disparities among countries in terms of trade and transport infrastructure and technology, which hinders the efficient movement of goods and people. The China-Mongolia-Russian Federation Economic Corridor development is a good example of adopting a more broad-based approach to promoting seamless connectivity. However, to ensure effective operationalization of these economic corridors, it is important to create platforms for better trade and transport policy coordination and transfer of technology. Now, moving on to Sustainable Development Goal 11, making cities and communities inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. The subregion faces multiple challenges on this front. First and foremost, East and Northeast Asia is one of the most disaster-prone regions in all of Asia Pacific. The vulnerabilities are exacerbated by both climate change and rapid population aging. While these social dimensions of sustainable development have previously been considered domestic issues, the COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated that there is need for sub-regional cooperation, particularly on information exchange and science, technology, and innovation for tackling not only the spread of infectious diseases, but various social challenges, including population aging. Sub-regional cooperation in East and Northeast Asia has been most active in the area of environmental sustainability. There are multiple cooperation mechanisms with different geographic coverage, governance structures, and areas of work. As a result of active cooperation by governments and other stakeholders involved in these mechanisms, there have been improvements in overall environmental management in many countries. However, certain challenges, including air pollution and marine pollution, have significantly deteriorated over the years and requires concerted efforts by the sub-region. There are opportunities for enhancing efficiency and effectiveness of these entities through better coordination and joint action. In sum, as presented today, sub-regional challenges that we are facing are multifaceted and intertwined. As such, we need to find new approaches to addressing these sub-regional challenges. The ESCAP report proposes broad-based and inclusive sub-regional cooperation that builds on existing mechanisms and engages different stakeholders to tackle not just one sector-specific issue, but connected issues as well. The report also calls for strengthening institutionalized sub-regional cooperation, as East and Northeast Asia remains the only sub-region in the Asia Pacific that lacks strong institutions to support cooperation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ye-Jin. To discuss some of the key issues raised in the report, we have invited here leading experts, practitioners, and policymakers from the sub-region and international organizations. I'm very pleased to introduce the speakers of the first panel discussion to you. We have Ms. Mika Obayashi, Director of the Renewable Energy Institute of Japan. Ms. Oyu Vasha, Director of the Department of Foreign Trade and Economic Cooperation, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mongolia. Mr. Bernard Aritois, Senior Infrastructure Specialist at the World Bank, currently joining us from China. Mr. Stephen Wong, Deputy Executive Director, Our Hong Kong Foundation. And last but not least, Ms. Shim-Shu Kyung, Executive Director, Bureau of Exhibition and Education, National Institute of Ecology, Republic of Korea. Let me start by talking about sub-regional connectivity. The potential for power interconnection in the sub-region has been a topic of much discussion with the presidents and business leaders in the sub-region voicing their support. Yet, the level of interconnection is limited compared to other parts of Asia. In this regard, I would like to ask Ms. Mika Obayashi about some of the factors hampering progress on regional power connectivity and how can the sub-region address these to move forward and achieve greater power system integration. Also, particularly given the abundant renewable sources of energy in the sub-region, how can power system integration utilize more renewables and contribute to climate change actions much needed in the sub-region? Please, Mika.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Chair Bassanio. I feel very honored to speak to all of you here who have been working on connecting our home region Asia get together. I miss to meet all of you, but at the same time, I am pleased that I could talk to you even from my very small room sitting here with my cat. As we have all seen, the recent corona pandemic is locking down cities and dividing countries. In the midst of these crises, divisions in worldview have become ever wider, and in modern times, there has been no time as important as now to listen to the science. Science has been warning us about the modern world's vulnerability to an extremely infectious disease for a long time, but key stakeholders and citizens at large focused on the short term until it was too late. Science has also been warning us about another vulnerability for humans' continued existence, climate crisis. Both emanate from humanity's over interface in nature, and while one has already hit, we still may have time to counteract to the other. While we will eventually find a solution to the current outbreak, there is no short-term cure for the climate crisis, and its long-term effects will only worsen. Humans all over the world are already suffering, and yet we seem to be taking no serious action. Asia is a region most vulnerable to the climate crisis, yet at the same time, it is also the region that lags behind others in taking serious action on the crisis. Competition among countries in the region for the fastest GDP growth and thus perceived power has led to the construction of thermal power plants, increasing dependence on coal and oil, and deforestation. Yet as these countries are in the midst of economic growth, there is enormous potential for the adoption of decarbonization technologies such as renewables and increased energy efficiency. Let me just share my slide to show you what is going on in the global scale, and also that what is a kind of a prospects that we could go for. Are you seeing my slide? Probably yes, right? Okay. And then I just missed my camera here. Okay. So the technologies such as renewable and energy. So this is a kind of image from this summer's typhoon hit Japan as well as China. So the those kind of typhoon occurring like several times in a year, and it's even that increasing the numbers, and also that sometimes that the two typhoons at the same time hit those areas. So the climate crisis is really worsened in the area that I could say. But at the same time, in the global scale, this is a kind of a global energy transmission figures that, for example, from 2000, solar is 450 times that expanded, reached about 600 gigawatt at the last year. And also this is a global wind expansion. From 2000, wind is that the 36 times that expanded and reached about 620 gigawatt. And the cost of renewables are declining and declining. And for example, solar photovoltaic, that in past 10 years that it declined at 80% of the cost, and wind power is almost at 40% declining in the cost. That is also happening in Japan, that Japan is always referred as the kind of a most expensive renewable energy country, but we are catching up that global trend now. So there is there's some hope that we could reach. There could be another way to choose. The decarbonization announcement of expanding among the areas, and also the higher renewable targets in South Korea, China, India, and Vietnam is one of the source of optimism. And recently, probably, Japan will join the team that next week that the Prime Minister seems to announce that Japan will lead decarbonization by 2050. That is a kind of a new approach by the Japanese government. In the midst of the corona crisis worldwide, renewables are on the rise, while their costs are seeing year-on-year decline, as we already seen. Unlike fossil fuels, renewables are seeing progress more similar to the high-tech industry, with constant, minor, but systemic and significant gains, which may be taking us in the right direction. The grid network and storage batteries for using renewables are also being innovated and reducing cost. renewable energy is expanding Asia, opening up high opportunities. We are seeing growth in the big economies, China, Japan, Korea, while other countries in the regions are also working hard. For example, this image shows the huge potential of the offshore wind worldwide. And you could see that, especially in the Asia region, that there is a huge potential of offshore wind here. And this is the based on the one of the scenario of IEA. You could see Japan has the 900% of the supply by offshore wind for the predicted that the electricity demand in 2040. So we see the huge opportunity of expanding that renewable energies in that region. At the heart of the world's decarbonization efforts in the needed for variable renewables, with wind and solar at the front and center, supported by others, Asia needs to expand and use these energies effectively, and I believe and hope we have the minds and hearts to do it. To achieve this, it is essential to build a flexible grid covering a wider geographic operational area. To take one example, Mongolia, which currently relies heavily on coal fossil fuels, has large enough renewable energy resources to meet the energy needs of Asia as a whole. I think that our colleagues from Mongolia here that will present about the enormous renewable energy potential of Mongolia later. But if we broaden our perspective of what we can achieve through international cooperation and planning, suddenly many more opportunities arise. So this is a kind of the current status that we have the huge GDP in the Asian region and population as well. And if we collaborate together, that Asia, especially the Northeast Asia, could be larger than the European area, to be a demand center, as well as the big economies that will emerge here. And also we can utilize that, exploring that renewable energy in that region. So in the midst of the fragmentation caused by the corona crisis, there is an increasing need for Asia to come together to confront the climate crisis. Subregional cooperation is needed now. Corona pandemic is estimated to have reduced global carbon dioxide emissions by 7%. In order to avoid the climate crisis and leave the safe global environment capable of sustaining life, CO2 emissions must be reduced by 7 to 8% annually starting in 2020. It means we'll have to keep doing what we are doing now and for the foreseeable future. It is impossible to continue what we are doing now. Based on this lessons learned, we must choose to make bold changes that will increase our resilience to the projected risks. In recovering from the corona crisis, we often hear the phrase, the new normal, but let us invest the future without returning to the old system of business as usual or the old normal, one that uses large amounts of fossil fuels. We need to use this crisis as turning point in our social system and implement policies that will attract new investment and create new jobs to make our society sustainable. If we tackle two crises of health and climate at the same time and apply a holistic economy perspective, the world will not only recover better, but will be healthier, cleaner, and more prosperous for us all. Interregional energy cooperation will bring us new future, I believe. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mika. Indeed, reduced carbon dioxide emissions is possibly the only positive externality of COVID-19. And it's very important that we try to find ways of maintaining this reduction through cooperation on renewables. In addition to energy connectivity, trade connectivity is also a key component to ensuring that the countries in the subregion recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. On this front, I would like to ask Ms. Oyu Vasha the following question. So Mongolia plays an active role in advancing the global agenda, addressing the needs and challenges faced by landlocked developing countries, being an LLDC itself. In the context of dynamics in East and Northeast Asia, trade and transport connectivity is more critical to sustainable development in Mongolia than any other country. How can Mongolia promote a more broad-based and inclusive approach to facilitate seamless connectivity in the subregion? Please, Oyu, Director Oyu.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gambold, for inviting me to this policy dialogue, which is convenient to celebrate United Nations 75th anniversary and 10th anniversary of ESCAP East and Northeast Asia Office. And what makes this event very special, at least to me, is that during my tenure from 2006 to 2009, as a representative of my government to the UN ESCAP, the member countries then engaged in the very intensive discussion on the establishment of the subregional offices and its possible mandate, which eventually led to the creation of 3 ESCAP offices in the region. And I'm very pleased to see now that East and Northeast Asian office is bringing UN ESCAP closer to the peoples of our countries and promoting subregional priorities in the subregion. Before I start, I would like to thank the UN ESCAP and the East and the Northeast Asian Office and Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea and Incheon Metropolitan City for hosting this dialogue. Mongolia is one of the largest landlocked countries in the world, with a territory extending over 1.5 million square kilometers. But what we strive to be is to be a land-linked rather than landlocked. 1,110 kilometers long central land corridor for container express train from China to Europe. In the Asian Highway 3 and Asian Highway 4 roads of the Asian Highway network pass through Mongolia. There were less than 3 express trains passing through Mongolia in 2013, but it has been increasing year by year, and in 2019, it increased to 1,450, in other words, by 140 times increase. This year, it's expected to grow to 2,400 transit trains, which basically means that Mongolian Railway transporting nearly 20% of the total transit trains from China to Europe. Though it is a single track, non-electrified, Mongolian Railway is struggling in terms of its capacity. If we engage effectively with our neighboring countries in facilitating the border cooperation and border operations, improving cooperation among customs authorities, reducing downtime, and introducing electronic document exchange technology, we believe there is a room for further increase in the number of container trains in transit. In this context, Mongolia has been cooperating with its 2 transit neighbors bilaterally and trilaterally. Over the last several years, Mongolia has concluded several important bilateral and trilateral agreements with our neighboring countries, such as intergovernmental agreement on road transportation along the Asia Highway network, intergovernmental agreement on the access to and from the sea and transit transportation through Chinese territory by Mongolia, and intergovernmental agreement between the governments of Mongolia and the Russian Federation on terms for rail freight transit transportation. Today, one of the main priorities of the government is to implement the trilateral Mongolia-Russia-China Economic Corridor Program. This program set main directions for 3 countries on cooperation in the various fields, including 32 projects. There have been a series of trilateral summit meetings that were designed to give the overall guidance to implement this program. So far, 3 probably you know that the main directions of cooperation were emphasized and all are in infrastructure. The first direction is addressing Asian Highway AH3 and AH4, And second direction concerns the modernization and doubling the central railway passage that I've just mentioned. And finally, the last direction covers the gas pipeline project, which is supposed to deliver Russian gas to China via Mongolian territory. Recognizing the important role of infrastructure in reducing high trading costs and improving competitiveness, the government of Mongolia attaches a great attention to both physical and non-physical infrastructure development within the country. As for non-physical infrastructure, Mongolia has acceded to WTO's Trade Facilitation Agreement and Asia-Pacific Trade Agreement framework on the facilitation of cross-border paperless trade is studied here in Mongolia with the purpose of reducing trade costs. And if these two agreements are fully implemented, trade costs will be reduced by 30% in this country, according to the research we have conducted together with ESCAP. Vision 2050, Mongolia's long-term development policy, encompasses the reduction of transportation logistics costs, refinement of transport agreements, and in particular, integration in the regional economy and trade. Along this purpose, Mongolia established the Economic and Partnership Agreement with Japan in 2016. And by 2019, we witnessed 40% export growth, 40% trade growth with Japan. In September 2020, Mongolia became the 7th participant state of the Asia-Pacific Trade Agreement. And feasibility study with the Korea-Mongolia Economic Partnership Agreement has been completed in 2018. And we have just recently started the exercise of updating our joint study with the Republic of Korea. Also, we launched a feasibility study to establish economic partnership agreement with Eurasian Economic Union and also our neighboring country, People's Republic of China. As for the other regional initiatives, Mongolia closely following the development of regional comprehensive economic partnership. As part of the government of Mongolia's policy agenda for 2022 to 2024, the road and transport sector's objective is to expand and develop export and logistics network that supports economic improvement and meets the social demands and requirements and provides safe and comfortable service. Consequently, the subregional well-connected landscape routes can directly boost the passage on transit goods and reduce the transaction cost. Despite the above-mentioned achievements, Mongolia, like all landlocked developing countries, has gaps in infrastructure. And expanding and upgrading road, railway transport and border crossing infrastructure remains to be the biggest challenge due to the magnitude of the resources required to invest in infrastructure development and maintenance. In addition, we still encounter capacity constraints to make a full use of the relevant international conventions and the bilateral agreements. At the same time, support and the active cooperation with transit countries is one of the utmost importance to address the special development needs and challenges that we face in the landlocked developing countries. More work and increased attention is needed to fully and effectively implement the international conventions and bilateral agreements that offer better conditions for transit transportation of landlocked developing countries. Thank you, Mr. Gambold.
Thank you, Director Oyu. And indeed, we highly note the role of Mongolia and especially its proactive and comprehensive approach to engage with neighboring economies and other stakeholders, including the ESCAP, to promote and improve the connectivity in the subregion. On a related note, I would like to ask Mr. Bernard Aritois how cross-sectoral engagement, for instance, between trade and transport, be facilitated, given that seamless connectivity is a multifaceted endeavor with issues not solely under the purview of one sector. So please, Mr. Aritwa.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much for this opportunity to participate in this policy dialogue. And I would like to congratulate ESCAP for putting together the study that underpins this discussion, but also to the organizers of the event. It's a very special time in which to be discussing these kind of issues. And I start my comments with a very brief presentation which has relevance. And this is the fact that in 2009, the World Development Report published by the World Bank on reshaping economic geography touched on exactly this subject. And the question that was posed in the report was, how can regional economic cooperation agreements be made to benefit all the countries that are within that region? And this was a very important question because at that time, many countries and regions were pushing forward with various economic agreements. And the report basically had a number of controversial conclusions. One of them was that for countries to benefit from regional economic cooperation, you need to start small and specific. This was a very big shift from the previous ways that the World Bank had looked at these kind of economic cooperation agreements. So it made the point that start small, start specific. And at that point in that report, reference was made to the 6 countries in 1951 that started what has now become the European Union. And these 6 countries concentrated on the opportunity to improve steel and coal trade between the countries and from those countries to the rest of the world. And they started small, they started specific. So one of the main conclusions of the World Development Report on shaping economic geography was that countries that are in proximity to high density economies, by being specific, can have a much more accelerated impact on the individual countries, but also on the region. Since then, the World Bank has published a number of similar reports. One was published for South Asia, a glass house half full, which showed that by enhancing the specific cooperation between countries in South Asia, you could multiply the economic output by 15-fold. 2019, we had the report on the Belt and Road Initiative and its economics, the opportunities and risks. This report touched on countries that are either beneficiaries or stand to lose out from the Belt and Road Initiative. And more recently, in the 2020 World Development Report on global value chains. So the main conclusion you can draw from these reports, as the thinking on economic integration has evolved, is that the right institutional frameworks are important, but these institutional frameworks have to support very specific initiatives. Large, multi-country, multilateral, high-level agreements are very good to build political consensus, but in order to get specific, tangible outputs, it has to be much more specific than the large outputs. Also, in discussing infrastructure, which is a key bottleneck for cooperation between countries, it is important to balance the needs of specific countries and the region at large. From our analysis, some infrastructure that is critical for regional cooperation may not necessarily be a priority for the individual countries. And so this dialogue between countries and the region has to also focus on what infrastructure is extremely critical and prioritize those infrastructure, whether they are critical for the region or for the country. And then finally, the topic of logistics, which is beyond the physical infrastructure, which has to do with the services that link the shippers to the customers. And when you look at this graph that we prepared based on the logistics performance indicator, it confirms what many of us know, that countries with good logistics inevitably have better economic outcomes. And we see in the Eastern and Northeastern Asian region, some of the economic powerhouses, China, Japan, Korea, invariably have very much better performance indicators in terms of logistics. And Mongolia, in that region, sort of lags behind, but it has an interesting, it raises interesting questions. How can you help, or how can the countries cooperate better between themselves, but also support an accelerated development of logistics in Mongolia? And I'll just tackle that very briefly as I make these concluding comments. One, that when we talk about logistics in Mongolia, it is important to understand the spatial challenges that exist. This map on the left-hand side shows that geographically Mongolia is about 2/3 the size of Europe. But because of the issues of demographic and the density that Mongolia is faced with, about 6 times the size of the UK, but 1/3 the population of London. It is not practical and is not even affordable to expect that you can connect all the infrastructure in Mongolia and build all the road network in the country, in addition to building the transit infrastructure. Because of these demographic and spatial challenges, there has to be a surgical approach to how you approach infrastructure, which obviously is made worse by the COVID-19 pandemic and also the issues that we've just discussed in terms of the logistics. So if you take the example of the corridor that connects China to Europe, the number of routes that can be used to go across, this was mentioned by the previous speaker, that the transit freight through Mongolia seems to present the shortest route from much of the industrial belt of China, connecting directly to the Trans-Siberian network. But the infrastructure challenge in Mongolia is this, that you have this non-electrified single track line, which, okay, the gauge issues may be solved quite easily, but the fact is the infrastructure is needed. So how do you go about developing that infrastructure, which would be necessary for improving the transit traffic, but more importantly, also for supporting Mongolia's economic development? It is clear that the cost of this cannot be borne by Mongolia, in the range of $7 to $11 billion to make it a double-track electrified line. It's not possible to expect Mongolia to bear that cost. But also the lack of mechanisms for financing this important inter-country line remain an open question. And this is one of the challenges of how to get this connectivity done. But the main point that I'd like to discuss here on the connectivity, and this goes back to the Belt and Road Initiative economics report, is that the country, the individual country, in this case Mongolia, must also develop its domestic infrastructure for it to better connect to the regional and global markets. So what is needed for this? For this, you need very, very detailed evidence base, and a very detailed evidence base. In partnership with the government of Mongolia during the last 2 years, the World Bank has been working to develop this evidence base, which essentially is a disaggregated freight flow model of the entire country, which seeks to understand in much more detail the various commodity flows within the country, the volumes, the costs, the mode, and build this freight flow model that can be disaggregated by commodity, by jurisdiction, and by cost. It's on this basis then that it's possible to have an informed dialogue of what the actual potential is for the demand for this central line. And so when discussing between Russia, China, and Mongolia, which part of the network to prioritize, there is an evidence base which says this is what we are trying to achieve in the long run, and here's how we can bring along not only the infrastructure, but the demand. Such an evidence base is a credible foundation for discussing the central question that was posed, and that is how to build more broad-based engagement to support trade and transport facilitation. And in conclusion, I would say, if I was to summarize it, there are basically 4 important points that lead to that could support such an initiative. One is to focus on the cargo and the customer. It's not enough to just build infrastructure and hope that the freight will come and use it. Of course, there is big demand and large volumes from China and from Russia, which are very important trading partners for Mongolia. But if you look at it from a much more broader perspective on the trade between Asia and Europe, you see that focusing on the cargo will enable much more practical solutions that will attract users or shippers to these particular routes, and therefore establish an economic base, this proximity that we were talking about in the World Development Report. The second is that it is important to have macro level analytics, but granular analysis for freight in individual countries creates a base for creating these win-win solutions, which are evidence-based. The third is regarding the policy instruments. The investments in infrastructure are one of the policy instruments, but there are various other policy instruments that could be used at the national level, but also at the regional level, which can support this kind of engagement. And the financing challenges for regional infrastructure require tailor-made solutions. And perhaps, and I say this with the greatest humility, better use of international financial institutions or regional financial institutions that can provide not only the financing, but also other instruments that enable leveraging of other private sector resources. So these are my final comments, and I'll stop here. I hope this has been useful, and I'm happy to engage on the question and answer. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Editor. Overcoming infrastructure challenges in the subregion through multimodal transport development is certainly key to unlocking the potential for economic and social development in East and Northeast Asia towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Now I'd like to turn to social issues such as health and well-being. Mr. Stephen Wang, the COVID-19 pandemic brought to the forefront of the development agenda challenges of adequate healthcare and social protection. And this subregion, added to this, is unprecedented population aging. How can this subregion leverage its advancements in science, technology, and innovation to support healthy aging? And how could government policies support healthcare technology in general? What are the common challenges and potential areas of subregion in that regard? Mr. Wang?
Yes, thank you for your time. I wanted to share my PowerPoint as well, because as you know, this region that, we basically have the largest population in as elderly is aging very fast. And so this is something that we have to deal with, particularly with the help of technology. So let's see if you can see my PowerPoint slides. Okay. So we did a report previously to show that in order to solve this problem, you got to actually fix the cup in between so that you have a strong ecosystem with a lot of inputs, and so that the elderly can benefit from all these outputs. And I wanted to talk, my 5-10 minutes around these 4 areas. First, in order to actually do this, you need to basically have good education. People need to be aware of it. What I call awareness or prerequisite stage. Stage 1. Number 2, we need to have good research so that you have good products and good commercialization effort in the product development stage to realize some of the products that can be based on the research as a second and third stage. And finally, what we call adoption stage is that actually people need to use it. And around these 4 areas, you can see that a lot of coordination and collaboration efforts need to take place. So, which is the theme of today, I guess, is a local collaboration as well as inter-regional or cross-regional collaborations. I would use these 4 frameworks as a basis for the collaboration discussions that we have. But first, I will, use Hong Kong, some of the examples among these 4 areas to illustrate what I mean by that. Number 1, on the sort of prerequisite stage for education and awareness building, we actually have what we call a G1 Technology Innovation Expo and Summit that is led by non-profit organization as well as community organizations sponsored by the government to actually raise the awareness, as well as what we call a Golden Age Expo and Summit. And then when we not only talk about it in the panels or in Summit, we also go around in various district locations. So these are what we call district roadshows. After you build the awareness, you need to have actually some of the basic research, as well as what I highlighted here is the midstream research program, so that the basic research from the universities need to be translated and transferred into commercialization. And this is what we call the value of depth, usually in the product cycle, where a lot of fundings are sometimes missing from the market, which the government needs to step in. And we have an example of a midstream research program where it funds a software program that will actually help this robot to identify different terrains, whether it's slope or staircase, accordingly. So it's a software that is researched by engineering departments in one of the universities funded by this program that we actually advocate a couple of years ago. And another example on stage 3 is after you have basic research, you have some of the midstream research, you need to then test the prototype and pilot. And what you need to do is to actually have some public support in order to have test case and use case. Some of these examples that I use here is a public funding, what we call public sector trial scheme, where, for example, this cardiovascular monitoring device can be used and trialed and piloted in public hospital. And so these are very important interventions that the public sector can do to help the promotion of these technological adaptations. And finally, and also as well as on the product development stage, one of the areas that we are missing is the test beds or test case or test centers, where you actually have a venue for all these pilots and scientific productions to be tested. I use this example that we advocated as well in our previous research, is that we need to have collaborations with universities as well as hospitals and community care centers to pilot and test some of these scientific products that we actually talked about. And finally, on the adoption stage, it is also important to for collaboration to take place, as well as public intervention. So we advocated and we actually got a government support. This is $1 billion to fund some of the NGOs, nonprofit organizations, to use a list of the products on the left-hand side. For example, electric nursing and wheelchair bed that is actually quite very elderly friendly. You can actually go to a very low, close to the floor, so that it's easy for elderly to get on. And another example is you need collaboration for example, this is the stair climbing service. This machine is not very high tech, it's been around for a long time, but you need to have some collaboration with welfare organizations so that it can, someone can purchase this equipment and lease it out, working together with social workers to identify people that are in need of that and be able to rent it out at a very low cost, at a very convenient and accessible way. So all these four efforts need to take place, and obviously we have seen other places. For example, in mainland China, Shanghai, in Japan, in Korea, that actually have done similar an aspect of this. Now, as I said, collaboration is a theme, with this product cycle that I mentioned, and so therefore we advocated. And for example, we are glad to see that we are part of this collaborative program in Hong Kong called Jinrong Technology Platform in Hong Kong. That actually will, basically is a that pull together knowledge hub, network and capacity building, consultancy, localization and testing effort, and impact measurement. So it's a platform that put everybody together within Hong Kong to actually push this technology for active aging forward. Now we have to envision that this is not just for Hong Kong, obviously, but how do we build this platform? How do we build this collaboration across different regions and areas? So this is what we think. In the middle, you see the four stages that we have looked at before: prerequisite stage, research stage, product development stage, and adoption stage. And within that four stages, there are elements that we can actually work together as a region. For example, whether we can build the awareness and accessibility through a website together, whether we can actually train expert and officials together in capacity building, whether these funding that we talked about in the research stage, in the test case, we can actually pull together. Data sharing, obviously, because it takes a lot of data in order to refine the products and understand the customer needs on probably an anonymous basis. And for example, the test cases that I talked about, whether there are shared venues that can be envisioned, and finally, product subsidies. And so these are the four stages. Around these four stages, there are many elements that we have seen collaboration actually will help in Hong Kong. And now we are quite convinced that these collaborations is also necessary across region to make this really be helpful, not just to Hong Kong, not just to one particular country or region, but actually the entire region together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wong, for sharing your ideas on ways how the region can cooperate and leverage technology for supporting the region's rapidly aging population. As population aging has always been viewed as a domestic issue, it's important for us to enhance awareness on areas where regional cooperation can help. One of the areas that the region has had active multilateral cooperation is environment. Now I'll turn to Ms. Shim Soo-kyung. So the experience of COVID-19 as well as other zoonotic diseases alert us the danger of our broken relationship with nature. Increasing risks of climate crisis also highlights the value of sustainable ecosystem management. In this connection, there is a growing awareness of nature-based solutions to various environmental and social challenges. In your view, Ms. Shim, how do you see the potential in direction of scaling up environmental cooperation in this area?
Thank you, Mr. Ganbold. First of all, I would like to congratulate the 10-year anniversary of ESCAP East and Northeast Asia Office. It is my great pleasure to participate in the policy dialogue. The other speakers, although online. Please let me start my presentation with PowerPoint slides. Okay. Yeah, today I was invited to speak on environmental cooperation in East and Northeast Asia, particularly focusing on the potential and direction for scaling up environmental cooperation. Next, please. Next, please. Yeah, this sub-region is experiencing increasing challenges to environmental sustainability, including urgent global challenges like climate crisis, biodiversity loss, more recently marine litter and microplastics, and also more regional ones like pollution with PM 2.5, endangered endemic species and habitats, and so on. And on top of them, we are now amid the multifaceted challenges from the COVID-19 pandemic, which is fundamentally results from environmental problems like habitat destruction and wildlife collecting and trafficking. Despite some limited positive impact on environment due to reduced human activities, the post-COVID-19 recovery may not be so bright, not only economically, but also environmentally, if we do not make the next normal in favor of low carbon economy and environment as UNESCO campaigns. Next slide, please. There have been a considerable amount of environment cooperation mechanisms in Northeast Asia. However, they are mostly limited to information sharing and joint research, and no notable institution for multilateral environment cooperation or agreements. Meanwhile, as shown in this table on the slide, 3 environmental cooperation mechanisms are considered representative in terms of inclusive membership and areas. There are TEM, tripartite environment ministers meeting of 3 countries, and ESCAP, Northeast Asian Subregional Program for Environmental Cooperation under the UN ESCAP, and EABRN, East Asian Bioregion Network, which is a sub-regional network comprising the UNESCO's World Network of Bioreserves. Next, please. To address aforementioned weak multilateralism and limited ownership of the member countries in the sub-region, existing sub-regional mechanisms of environmental cooperation are required to be scaled up and become more inclusive in terms of particularly member countries, stakeholders, and environmental issues. In this regard, the potential roles of TEM and NIASPEC will have to be reinforced, seeking stronger political backing of the member states. A scaled-up environmental cooperation can help enhancing the cooperation on relevant fields in the sub-region, because environmental issues are basically interdisciplinary, as you all of you know. With this backdrop, I would like to suggest a few recommendations for the direction of scaling up environmental cooperation in the sub-region, as listed on this slide. Next, please. The first recommendation is to promote nature-based solutions as a central part of the sub-regional cooperation agenda. As many of you know, nature-based solutions are defined as actions to protect, manage, and restore ecosystems, simultaneously addressing many societal challenges. Nature-based solutions can address diverse major challenges that the sub-region is now experiencing, as listed on the slide. Moreover, they have to be essentially included in post-COVID-19 economic recovery policies and new growth strategies addressing to climate crisis. The European New Deal is a good example, I think. Therefore, I think sub-regional cooperation for nature-based solutions should be enhanced in this sub-region, promoting the national policies of member countries for implementing them. Furthermore, nature-based solutions will be able to instigate participation of countries or stakeholders in sub-regional cooperation by meeting urgent economic and social needs and providing better chance of fund mobilizing. Next, please. This slide shows the examples of nature-based solutions applied for disasters prevention, such as urban flood protection through wetlands and prevention of coastal flooding and erosion through restored mangrove forests. Next slide, please. The next case is about overview of the European Green Deal, which I just mentioned before. It was adopted by the EU as a new growth strategy to overcome the major challenges of climate change and environment degradation. This plan includes the nature-based solutions as a critical tool. Next slide, please. The second recommendation refers to the scientific data and evidence on environmental problems. Objective and verifiable scientific data is a basis and an indispensable factor for institutionalization of environmental cooperation. It helps intensify scientific and economic driver, reducing political considerations, and also can lead to creation or expansion of institutions for follow-up actions and involvement. In Northeast Asia, no enough scientific data on environmental status and problems has not been accumulated despite a fast-growing economy. Next, please. This case is about the project implemented by the ESCAP. This project introduced this project is one of good examples on significant role of scientific data accumulation. The ESCAP study was carried out regarding the trans-border movement of Amur tigers and leopards. And under this study, Chinese and Russian experts collected and shared data from camera trapping and DNA samples of the two species. And also they carried out molecular genetic analysis, applying the same methodologies for the first time. This cross-border collaboration and sub-regional level identify the high density and active border crossing of the species on the border areas and provide good grounds for further expanded transboundary conservation cooperation, including designation of potential international protected areas. Next, please. The next recommendation is to use global institutions as a basis for developing sub-regional cooperation. Participation of countries in global environmental cooperation can provide a good basis for initiating or scaling up sub-regional cooperation. The existing sub-regional mechanisms and relevant international organizations need to support the engagement of non-active countries or stakeholders groups in global institutions with a vision of scaling up sub-regional cooperation. This approach can also facilitate connecting sub-regional cooperation with global goals such as SDGs and the Paris Agreement. Next slide, please. In this regard, I like to introduce two examples very briefly. The first one is the East Asian Biosphere Reserve Network, which I mentioned previously. It was created in 1995 as a sub-regional network within the UNESCO's World Network. Its activities are shared across the World Network and reflect the global agenda. So multi or bilateral cooperation, including transboundary conservation, have been promoted through this mechanism. On the right side, the second example is the DPRK's joining in the Ramsar Convention. DPRK became a member of the Ramsar Convention for wetlands in 2019, last year, with the two first sites in Ramsar sites in Rasan and Wundong, as you can see on the map of the slide. DPRK is joining in the global environmental mechanism, creates a greater potential for sub-regional cooperation relating wetlands, including transboundary cooperation in the lower Tumen River area. Okay, that's all for my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Ms. Shim, you have highlighted really an important point about scaling up existing mechanisms on environmental cooperation to include more stakeholders and expanding to relevant fields, including energy and disaster risk reduction. Dear participants, colleagues, and esteemed guests, this concludes the first panel discussion. So I understand there may be questions from the floor. So we will try to take as many as possible after the second panel discussion. Now, for the second panel discussion, I would like to invite Mr. Chung Ki-yong, Director General for Climate Change, Energy, Environment, and Scientific Affairs, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Republic of Korea, to moderate this session. Just to add, Mr. Chung is one of the leading advocates within the Korean government for regional cooperation on energy connectivity and climate change action, and it is a great honor and pleasure to have him moderate this session. Mr. Chung, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Basanjev, for the kind introduction and giving me the opportunity to moderate this panel discussion on strengthening institutional sub-regional cooperation mechanism in East and Northeast Asia. First, let me congratulate you on ESCAP ENEA office's 10th anniversary. I have, on a number of occasions, worked closely with ESCAP over the years, particularly on energy security, connectivity, and climate change. And through the ENA office, we were able to increase engagement with other sub-regional countries and achieve tangible outcomes. Now, let me turn to our distinguished panelists, who are heads of key sub-regional cooperation mechanisms and sub-regional research institute and leading academic experts. I have the great pleasure of introducing you to first Mr. Michigami Hisashi, Secretary General of the Trilateral Cooperation Secretariat, or TCS in Seoul. Mr. Andrei Smorodin, Director of the Greater Tumen Initiative in Beijing. Professor Masahiro Kawai, Representative Director and Director General of Economic Research Institute for Northeast Asia in Niigata. And Mr. Jang Haibin, Professor at the School of International Studies, Peking University. Let me start by asking a question to Secretary General Michigami. TCS is a multisectoral, multilateral sub-regional cooperation organization that has been working closely with its 3 member states on key areas. What are some of the areas that TCS made the most progress in terms of strengthening cooperation among members? And what areas were most challenging? For areas that worked well, what are the factors that determine successful cooperation? The floor is yours. Sorry, yes. I cannot hear. Oh, now I can hear you. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, and sorry. TCS, thank you for your kind introduction. It is my great honor to join this policy dialogue today. I'd like to extend my sincere congratulations on the 10th anniversary of UNESCAP ENEA office and on His Excellency, Mr. Gambolt. 2020 has been a year of tremendous socio-economic challenge. Global economies are shrinking. Plus, the divide between the rich and the poor will be widened. The World Bank estimated that additional 90 million people to fall into extreme poverty. The COVID-19 pandemic poses serious threat to human security. The vulnerable is most severely affected. The world is now seeking for rapid economic recovery, which is of course necessary. But I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that our human security foundation is now undermined. So we need to re-enhance foundations for people-centered, inclusive approach on mid and long-term strategies for achieving the sustainable development goals. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. As you see in the statistics, the share of CJK, I mean China, Japan, and Korea, is huge. And the cooperation among the three countries started in 1999. Now we have shared commitment to resolve common transboundary challenge. And TCS was established in 2011 to facilitate both governmental and non-governmental cooperation. The triangle scheme gradually developed into 21 ministerial meetings, as you see on the screen. Among them, today, I'd like to focus on 3 areas which will form a cornerstone of human security and sustainable development. I mean, environment, disaster management, and health. So next slide. Yes, thank you. In many countries, you have environmental activities at non-governmental level, such as coastal cleanup or tree planting. And here, CJK Environment Ministers Meeting, TEM, is one of the most successful and well-established schemes. This started in 1999. Last year, I attended the 21st TEM in Japan. What's unique about TEM is that they adopt and implement the joint action plan. So this is not mere statement or declaration. And the ministers agreed on the 8 priorities, as you can see on the screen, again, 8 priorities for the next joint action plan, in line with the efforts of the international community. What also struck me is the engagement of a wide range of stakeholders in this ministers' meeting. Business, professors, and students were attending sub-forums and actively discussing their own contributions. Events, research, and meetings are held throughout the year to keep the ball rolling. And we, TCS, has also joined these efforts and conducted projects focusing on capacity building of teachers for environmental education. Okay, next slide, yes. Disaster management. Every year, as you know quite well, the 3 countries experience natural disasters like typhoon, earthquake, and flood. Reduction of disaster risk has been a common concern, leading to the establishment of the ministerial meeting in 2009. Good practices are shared in many fields. At the last ministers' meeting, I found that China and Korea learned from Japan's rich experiences and knowledges, and they, China and Korea, strengthened their own disaster management scheme. In recent years, cooperation involves not only the central government, but also local governments, local communities, universities, and NGOs. Last year, TCS published a booklet to showcase the steady development of the past 10 years. Next, thank you. Health Ministers Meeting. This scheme began in 2007 as a joint response to pandemic flu. Since then, it has developed to address major health issues, including population aging, universal health coverage, and infectious diseases. After the breakout of COVID-19, CJK had different situations and responses, but the strategies and measures taken by these three countries attracted attention from many countries. Even under the most difficult circumstances, information exchanges among the medical experts of the three countries and WHO continued. Special video ministers meeting was held in May. And in July, we, the TCS and ESCAP, co-hosted a webinar which shared the responses and experiences of the three countries on COVID-19. And we had over 9,000 viewers from over 70 countries, which of course includes ASEAN countries, Mongolia, Russia, and many Middle East and European and Latin American countries. And lastly, next panel, please. Lastly, on future challenges and cooperation. In the pandemic, we reflect upon our conceptions of social and individual well-being. It also urges us to take a more balanced and holistic approach in development. In this regard, CJK cooperation, our trilateral cooperation, is young and active framework and has good potential within and beyond the region. One example, the three countries have highly sophisticated social infrastructure and technologies. The ongoing discussion on smart cities is aimed at improving the efficiency and quality of people's life. This is a necessary agenda. At the same time, we need to minimize the people who are left behind of the technology. Policies should be inclusive of the elderly, marginalized, and vulnerable population to enhance overall the resilience of the region. Recently, in Japan or Korea also, at the stations of subway, for example, we don't see people, we don't see staff. So if you want to ask how to buy the ticket and you don't know how to do that, you don't have a staff to ask. So for many people, technology gave us more convenient, efficient life, but it may not be better to some limited populations. So the global fight against COVID-19 is expected to continue. We are living in a very uncertain time now, yet building on existing foundations, trilateral cooperation will continue to expand, engaging a wider range of stakeholders. TCS will do our best to support the three countries' efforts, enhance partnership with other regional and international institutions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Secretary General. I was deeply impressed with the evolution of TCS since its inception in 2011, and you achieved so much, and it was very wise of you to choose those three areas to promote functional and practical cooperation. And also your view on the inclusive cooperation and not to leave anyone behind was something that I think is the right direction for the TCS. And I remember quite distinctly when I was serving in Korean Embassy in Tokyo in early 2000, there was a big discussion within Japan to establish and also to form some kind of an Asian common market or Asian community. I think this trilateral cooperation scheme could act as the catalyst to achieve such a dream and also to promote peace and prosperity in the region. Thank you very much, Ken. And now let me turn our attention to the greater Tumen initiative. So as the GTI is another important multilateral and multisectoral cooperation mechanism in East and Northeast Asia. And let me ask a similar question to Mr. Smorigin. How sub-regional organizations could develop synergies, build partnerships, and work together effectively to support sustainable development in the sub-region? The floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chung. Well, first of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the United Nations ESCAP East and Northeast Asia Office for inviting GTI Secretariat to take part in this policy dialogue. Well, as it was already on numerous times mentioned, the COVID-19 pandemic has confronted the world with an unprecedented situation. So inclusive subregional cooperation and development becomes even more significant now. In this regard, despite the difficulties, in 2020, the GTI has been maintaining a constant communication with our stakeholders in different sectors and holding related events. Well, most recently, just a week ago, we have organized the virtual meeting of the GTI Northeast Asia Local Cooperation Committee and its subcommittees. Well, nearly 90 representatives of the local authorities and private sector from the GTI region attended the conference. Participants reviewed the progress of LCC activities and discussed new project proposals and ideas. And even a new subcommittee on marine cooperation was established. Besides that, in September, also participants from the GTI member countries and partners organized discussion on the policy, organized the policy dialogue on the industrial parks. They discussed issues and shared insight focusing on topics of industrial parks responding to COVID-19, shared their views regarding the challenges and suggestions for the development of value chain of Northeast Asia in post-pandemic area. A regular meeting of the GTI Agriculture Committee was also held in September. Members of the committee approved the work plan of the GTI Agriculture Committee for 2020, stressing the need to enhance coordination among members and promote agricultural cooperation in partnership with other stakeholders in response to COVID-19. The delegates discussed the renewal of the GTI Agricultural Cooperation Strategic Acting Plan for the coming 5-year period. In our work, we will continue to use a thematic and programmatic approach to our activities with specific focus on project and program development. Jointly with our members, we will exert efforts in revitalization of committee's work with area-specific approach to pursue project development and implementation. Involvement of private sector should also be addressed as one of the priority issues. Well, last year, at the GTI meeting in Changchun, well, GTI Northeast Asia Business Association was officially established under the GTI framework. This platform will enable more close collaboration with private sector to create favorable environment for promotion of businesses, identifying the needs of private sector in various dimensions. We believe that GTI Northeast Asia Business Association will be instrumental to intensifying involvement of business sector into the GTI activities, creating benefits for them as well. Another important pillar of inclusive cooperation is the cross-sectoral approach. In this regard, we are glad to see that both GTI and ESCAP have confirmed the necessity and are contributing towards increased coordination and synchronization activities between transport and trade facilitation sectors. Since 2019, together with ESCAP ENEA, office, we have been jointly organizing the International Seminar on Trade Facilitation Issues. And last year, we launched a regular joint event in transport sector. We hope that we could further build on those positive examples and initiate a cross-sectoral event or other forms of activities that would address specific issues in transport and trade facilitation areas. Well, another strategically important issue, which is on GTI's agenda, is the geographical coverage. Since full coverage in the Northeast Asia region may release more potential to GTI's activities and initiatives. For example, Japan, which is not a GTI member, has been taking part in several GTI's activities for the last few years, with Tottori Prefecture being a member of a GTI Northeast Asia Local Cooperation Committee. We also would welcome the DPRK to rejoin GTI as a member or join certain GTI activities in some of the sectors. And I assume that enhancing synergy with the ESCAP could also play a positive role in this regard. We are all aware that there are several sub-regional cooperation organizations and mechanisms in Northeast Asia region. Those organizations are different in terms of geographical coverage, membership, aims, and priority areas for their activities. Well, sometimes those differences might be an obstacle to cooperation and realization of certain activities. However, we believe that by having a closer and more extensive dialogue and exchanges, we can find ways how to transform our differences into new possibilities and convert them into driving force for sustainable and inclusive development in the region. During this challenging time, we should seek common points and jointly work out the ways and means for rehabilitation of the sub-regional cooperation. GTR Secretariat is ready to work with our member countries and our partners to attain these aims. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Suboriginal. It was quite, your presentation and was very impressive on illuminating the thematic and programmatic approach and finding ways to increase synergies through support with private sector and also with your cross-sectoral approach, and also to expand geographical coverage. Well, good luck with your efforts. Now, well, ESCAP's report strongly argues for the need for stronger institutional mechanism to push forward sub-regional development agenda, and at the same time, instead of one single entity, there is need for network multilateralism, as the Secretary General of the United Nations recently said. Sorry, yeah, I mean, I must have mistaken on that. Sorry. So let me now turn the attention to Professor Masahiro Kawai for his presentation, and just for the question. In your expert view, as a leading expert on sub-regional cooperation, and also based on your experience of having worked in the government, World Bank, and ADB, how can sub-regional countries and various mechanisms build trust and consensus?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Director General Chun, for your kind introduction. I have PowerPoint. And perhaps Yejing. Okay, thank you very much. Next slide. I am heading a think tank called the Economic Research Institute for Northeast Asia. And from my perspective of this think tank and from my past experiences, I want to provide some personal views on how Northeast Asia may organize its sub-regional multilateral cooperation mechanisms. Of course, ESCAP is the most comprehensive multilateral organization in Asia and the Pacific. And ESCAP also brings the global agendas to Asia and the Pacific, and tries to share ideas of how to tackle those global challenges. And ESCAP does support subregional cooperation because countries in a subregion tend to face common issues and challenges. So that's very good. But when we step back and take a look at the other subregions of Asia and the Pacific, we have only a few limited number of multilateral and multisectoral subregional cooperation mechanisms and organizations in Northeast Asia. So the question is, what can Northeast Asia do? So if I am allowed to provide my own personal views, I want to provide kind of a grand view as to what Northeast Asia can do, given that in the future, the DPRK can join the Northeast Asian cooperation mechanism. The next slide, please. This is just a brief explanation of ERINA, Economic Research Institute for Northeast Asia. I don't think I have time to go over this. Please go to the next slide. And perhaps you can go to the next slide. Okay. Now, this is a list of select subregional cooperation organizations in Asia and the Pacific. Asia and the Pacific has many kind of subregional organizations and mechanisms. The ones listed here are the major ones, and we can get some kind of idea about what's going on in other parts of Asia and the Pacific. There is the ASEAN, which is the most organized sub-regional organization covering 10 members, and they talk about political security issues, economic issues, and social cultural issues. SAARC, the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, South Asian countries get together and they discuss development issues. The Pacific Island Forum is participated by the Pacific Island countries. They also focus on sustainable development issues. Next slide, please. There are also sub-regional development cooperation programs in Asia and the Pacific. The ones listed here are major ones: the GMS, the Greater Mekong Subregion Program, the CAREC, Central Asia Regional Economic Cooperation, BIMSTEC, and also SASEC, South Asian Subregional Economic Cooperation. They focus on development issues, and actually financing is made because of the participation of MDBs, particularly the ADB, the Asian Development Bank, has been very active in supporting sub-regional development cooperation mechanisms. GMS, CAREC, and SASEC are very strongly supported by the Asian Development Bank. The Asian Development Bank is a multilateral development bank that has been supporting Asia and the Pacific's economic development and regional cooperation, including sub-regional cooperation, and they have development expertise, and also they can provide financing as an honest broker linking countries which may potentially have different views on various infrastructure projects, development projects. By providing financing, the ADB tries to be glue of countries in acting together. Next slide, please. So what needs to be done in Northeast Asia? We have the Trilateral Cooperation Secretariat, which has made an impressive work so far. I learned from Ambassador Michigami that there are 21 ministerial processes and the Greater Two-Men Initiative. And these organizations are trying to fill the gap in Northeast Asia. But TCS covers 3 countries, CJK, the Greater Two-Men Initiative does not include Japan as a formal member, and the DPRK used to be a member, but the DPRK withdrew from the initiative. I tend to think that these institutions have limited resources and limited political support because of the insufficient degree of trust among countries. So Northeast Asia is not enjoying the kind of sub-regional activities done by ASEAN, SAARC, or PIF. Northeast Asia is not enjoying the kind of development programs offered by the GMS, CAREC, or SASEC. In my view, Northeast Asian countries need to continue to build trust among countries, and so strengthening the network of various organizations would be very, very important as a trust building mechanism, and also as a tool to provide some tangible outcomes. But looking ahead in the future, Northeast Asia may need bigger mechanism, bigger organization. Tentatively, I'm calling it a Northeast Asian Subregional Development Program, which would be similar to GMS, CAREC, SASEC, and this Northeast Asian Subregional Development Program has to be participated by the existing organizations and mechanisms like ESCAP, TCS, CTI, and has to embrace many stakeholders, and also supported by the experienced MDBs like the ADB. Next slide, please. So now, Mongolia, maybe for the sake of discussion, please go to the next slide. Okay, the proposed Northeast Asian development program would be useful today for Mongolia. Mongolia is the only lower middle income country in the sub-region, But if we think about the possibility of the DPRK joining the international community, then we know that a massive amount of investment would be needed for the DPRK. Currently, of course, the DPRK is not a member of any of these organizations listed, but to prepare for future process of inducing the DPRK to come to the international community and join a development program, I believe that my proposed Northeast Asian sub-regional development program would be very, very useful. Next slide. This is my last slide. In conclusion, Northeast Asia is home to traditional and emerging bilateral donors of economic assistance. We have Japan, which is a traditional donor, has been supporting many developing countries in Asia and the Pacific. And Japan now promotes quality infrastructure investment. The ROK is increasing its presence as an OECD DAC donor country, and China has launched the AIIB and the Belt and Road Initiative. And this proposed Northeast Asian sub-regional development program can cover a wide range of common issues like sustainable development, infrastructure investment, and in the future, it can support the DPRK once it joins the international community. The member countries have to be the driver, and they should be supported by ESCAP, TCS, GTI, and bilateral donors. And member countries can utilize IFIs. The World Bank colleague mentioned about this. They have development financing experience, so why not utilize the IFIs for developing such a development program? Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Kawai. It was very also interesting to see the contrast between Northeast Asian region with other regions that you mentioned, Southeast Asia, South Asia, and Pacific Islands. And also you wisely identified the limitations due to lack of political trust and also financial resources. And it was also interesting to note your suggestion to build Northeast Asia sub-regional development program and also identifying what I think was the weak link in this region, which is the DPRK, which unfortunately has not shown any indication that they want to promote any regional cooperation at the moment, unfortunately. And you also noted the importance of multilateral development banks, but I also think because of the functional approach that Michigami-san has already mentioned with health, environment, and disaster management, there is also a climate change issue that can also bind us together. And I think in that sense, GCF is another source of financial assistance. And also, even though this is not a multilateral bank, there's another organization called GGGI, or Global Green Growth Institute, which provides technical assistance to members. So you mentioned the multilateral banks to act as a glue, and I think there are other glues that we can also think of. Thank you very much, Professor Kawai. Building on Professor Kawai's response, I would like to ask Professor Zhang his view on priorities of inclusive cooperation in the subregion and how the subregion can overcome the deficits in trust and leadership, particularly in view of challenges posed by COVID-19. So, yes, I'd like to invite Professor Zhang.
Yes, Mr. Chen.
Yes.
Thank you very much. First of all, warm congratulations on the 10th anniversary of ESCAP ENEA office. So today is a very, very important and a special moment for celebrating this very important day and time. My topic is a little bit bigger and broader. First of all, I like to draw your attention to the impacts of the geopolitical situation, which happened in recent years, particularly the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic. I think today our topic centered on how to strengthen the subregional cooperation on sustainable development in Northeast Asia and East Asia. To better understand the challenges and the opportunity facing this region regarding this topic, I personally believe it's necessary to have a better understanding what's new today. What's new today? So I like to begin with raising this question compared with 5 years ago when UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was passed, which is a milestone for sustainable development. Compare with 5 years ago. Are we more confident or less? Are we more confident? As far as I'm concerned, my feeling is very much mixed, very much mixed. On the one hand, we can say that in this region, Northeast Asia in particular, the countries get together, help each other. They actually assist each other. So that's actually an illustration of mutual trust. On the other hand, at the global level, a lot of things unexpected happened and took place. Let me just identify several major changes since the year 2016, particularly after the outbreak of COVID-19. In 2016, since Trump administration took power, we have to acknowledge that the world entered a new era, which mean, by that I mean, now the world is characterized by sort of a great power competition, I think that the outbreak of COVID-19 accelerates this trend and characteristics. There are several major features. First, in this new era, the sort of securitization of economy and technology intensify. Because of the time limit, I don't want to go into details. I just make my major points and observations. This is the first point. Economy and technology are increasingly being securitized. Therefore, intellectualities or intellectualness in the past was as a very beneficial to countries, to all the countries, or the friendship between the countries. Nowadays, decoupling economy now is very much prevalent in the world. Secondly, a lot of challenges facing globalization. Therefore, a lot of people argue that the speed of globalization after the outbreak of COVID-19 was slowed dramatically. some people even argue that's the end of globalization. Thirdly, I would argue that many countries, particularly small and medium countries, they are facing increasing pressure by taking sides between United States and China. And I think a lot of reports about this. Fourthly, ideological factor is playing more important role than before. So this time, when it comes to COVID, fight against the COVID-19, we as the different people have different ideas on how to assess the role of UN, including WTO. But one thing is very, very clear and certain. That is, we suffer a lot from this failure of international cooperation. The powers, big countries cannot cooperate this time. Many reasons for this, but one thing is very certain. That's China, United States, and other, big powers, particularly United States. They look at this issue, the cooperation from, partly from the perspective of ideological factor. So that's very, very, that's a big tragedy. Number 5, we can say that the tensions, the competition between United States and China intensify at the global level in Pacific area, in particular, in Taiwan Strait, in South China Sea. I think a lot of, military tensions. I think a lot of reports about this. The last but the least, international institutions are increasingly weakened by the way of Trump administration. So, because the U.S. Governments withdraw a lot of international institutions, including Paris Agreement. I think that this is the fact. So, based above the six challenges facing global governance and cooperation, can we apply this? Can we apply this description to the subregional cooperation in Northeast Asia? So my understanding is this. I think, of course, in terms of Northeast Asia region, something very different from the global level. At least we have the basic mutual trust among the 6 countries. I think that we are lucky. We are lucky because according to Mr. Guterres, last month, his very famous statement on the major challenges facing today's world, he cited 5 challenges facing the world. I think that in terms of, the first is the geopolitical tensions. The second is climate crisis. Third is the lack of global trust. The fourth is the dark side of cyber security. The fifth is pandemic COVID-19 pandemic crisis. So therefore, in this regard, I think we are quite lucky and fortunate in terms of the trust. I think in this region, we have some trust, at least. I think that that's a very lucky phenomenon. If we identify these major challenges facing the world and this sub-region, I think that in the future, looking into the future, how to strengthen the cooperation in this region, I think we need to, the number 1 or the most important thing today for this region is not the technical solutions. It's not a very specific formula. I think multilateralism, how to strengthen multilateralism is most important and urgent issue. Therefore, I strongly support the advocate for inclusive cooperation proposed by ESCAP at this very, very important moment. I think now how to get out of the dilemma, because I believe that the global governance and global cooperation is at a crossroads, including this region. If we cannot have a better understanding of the major challenges and the risks facing the world and East Asia, I think in the future, we will have a lot of problems. So looking into the future, if we want to push forward further cooperation in this region, we have to keep those challenges and risks in mind so that we can find solutions. With that, I conclude my talk, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Chung. It was very interesting to see. I was expecting that you were making a distinction at first between before COVID and after COVID, but it seems you're suggesting something of a new era through before Trump and after Trump. And I think in that sense, you're giving much, well, maybe too much credit to President Trump's well, actions and deeds. But anyway, what you identified as 6 challenges seems to be quite valid, and also your sense that there exists some sort of a basic trust among the 6 Northeast Asia countries will give us some solace that we can build upon that to increase cooperation and also for better governance. So that concludes the panel discussion on strengthening institutional sub-regional cooperation mechanism in East and Northeast Asia. And well, I would like to thank all the panelists for their very insightful presentations. Let me give back the floor to Ambassador Basanjev. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. General. Thank you very much, Dr. General Chung and all the speakers. Certainly we learned a lot from today's presentations and valuable insights you shared with us. So I'm sure the other participants will agree on this. So let's move on to the Q&A session. So we have asked our registered participants to submit questions they wanted to ask the panel members, and we received quite a number of questions. Also, we are currently taking questions from participants joining through MS Teams Live. Since we don't have the time to answer all the questions, so we will ask perhaps a couple of questions first, and then we see if we have more time, we can take more questions from the floor. The first question is directed to Dr. Kawai. What are some of the policies that countries in the subregion are introducing to build back better and recover from the pandemic? Are there any move toward policy coordination that you know of that could be seen as best practices? Dr. Kawai.
Thank you for asking me. Perhaps
we cannot hear you, Dr. Kawai. So okay, go ahead. Yes. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for directing that question to me. I feel that a better person to respond may be Ambassador Michigami, but you know, in response to the pandemic and build it back better, you know, I can think of 3 things. One is to have a stronger health system at the country level. The second, a stronger health system and a much better social safety net arrangement at the country level. The second is to push green recovery by focusing on investment for low carbon economy, which should support long-term benefits for countries. And the third point would be to push for digitalization of the economy reflecting the current situation where people's contact is limited, and but digitalization is going to increase productivity, particularly for SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises. I think these agendas are now being pushed at the individual country levels. Are they coordinating sufficiently? I think that's a question. The most recent statement by the ASEAN +3 foreign ministers meeting that took place in September does cover a lot of these discussions. Now, the question is whether CGK countries are now coordinating on these. I heard that there was a lot of information exchange on the pandemic. Now, more for longer term structural changes, how the health system should be strengthened, and how people should become more resilient to future pandemics. Now, perhaps in my view, a lot more coordination, a lot more discussion may be needed from a long-term perspective.
Thank you, Dr. Kawai. So the next question is to Secretary General Michigami. So what are some of the programs TCS is promoting to overcome the impact of COVID-19 in the region and beyond? Yeah, we cannot hear you, Secretary General.
Thank you for your question. And quickly, 3 points.
Yeah, now we can hear.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. First, to control and overcome the epidemic or pandemic itself, you and I, ESCAP and CKI, co-hosted the webinar on COVID-19, and through which the experiences and strategies of the 3 countries has been shared in many, many countries in the world. Second, the policy dialogue. Next week, on October 28th, the TCS will organize the East Asia Inter-Regional Dialogue, which includes not only CJK, but also several ASEAN countries. We'll have a dialogue on what sort of political, economic, social, cultural effects of the pandemic will be, and what cooperation we can do. And the last thing, real business recovery or restraint on the human people's movement. This is basically in the hands of 3 governments or each government. To be honest, we don't have a big room to do something or to lead something. But of course, we welcome any ideas or suggestions from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General. And there's one more question. Even though we are running out of time, so already we're well behind the schedule. So this probably that question I'll address to Ms. Shim. So what kind of work is necessary to create stronger consensus around nature-based solutions, particularly in the context of building back better and greener? Ms. Shim?
Thank you. Yeah, this is a very challenging question, but it's very important as well. Yeah, the nature-based solutions have been some years ago already issued in the world society, and there have been small, big applications of related projects in many parts of the world, but still the real examples or very promising results are lacking still. So many international organizations and academic societies are promoting this this strategy, and to in many fields of the society, particularly in the national policies and also the development aids. So I think still environmental protection, environmental cooperation, environmental projects are still under lower priority in many national policies. Even I can say some in many international agenda. So to overcome, to break through, to get the breakthrough this constraint, I think that we need to highlight more is interconnecting or interdisciplinary possible benefits from this kind of approach. So we have a lot of challenges, as I mentioned in my presentation, like climate change and disasters, and even at this moment increasing zoonotic diseases like COVID-19. So we need to show how the more benefits, more positive impacts from our investing in nature to overcoming to addressing this kind of global and regional, even national challenges. So yeah, it is. I hope still personally, I'd like to share with you. In Korea, in my country, still this idea, this concept is not well visioned to the society, even academic people. So I think the international organizations like ESCAP also are expected to have more activities to show these potential approach of nature-based solutions to the member countries and other groups of the stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shim. And so this brings us to a close of our program. So there are many questions, but we will exhausted all our dedicated time already. So, and I have to close, bring this discussion to a close. And thank you very much for all of your active participation and engaging discussions. Let me once again thank Mr. Chong Ki-yeon and all our distinguished speakers for sharing their views on inclusive sub-regional cooperation in East and Northeast Asia for sustainable development. The battle with COVID-19 is likely to go on for some months now, and we have a long recovery process ahead. To ensure that the sub-region builds back better and to accelerate progress towards achieving the SDGs, East and Northeast Asia needs to strengthen cooperation and find solutions to common challenges together. On this note, I would like to thank you again for your active and engaging participation, and thank you very much, and stay healthy and safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.